What's up, man? Thank you for coming on the BlueMix podcast. Now you're calling in from, is this South Carolina or North?
Charlotte, North Carolina. We're right on the border of South Carolina,
Oh,
so I get the best of both worlds of North Carolina barbecue and South Carolina barbecue, which there is a big difference actually between the two. So
awesome, man. Is it barbecue season there yet?
it's barbecue season all the time
Oh
around
yeah,
here.
okay.
Yeah, but
We're in Toronto. We're seasonal, man. We gotta calculate when
yeah.
we're out.
Well, as you can probably tell from my I'm in my sports bar den down here
Yeah,
at my
yeah.
house because we're still social distancing. But I'm from Michigan originally. I'm from Detroit and probably Michigan State grad, but no, relocated to the southeast about 12 years ago and call this home. But yeah, we've got great barbecue. So North Carolina is more of it's pork based and it's more of a vinegar style base, and then South Carolina is also pork, but it's more of a mustard base. So I love blending the two.
Cool.
Yeah.
How's that been like not being able to have like large scale barbecues? Like you can't have people over. Like you still barbecue for yourself.
Yeah, we've got smokers. Pretty much everybody that I know has some type of smoker in their
Yeah.
house, and so we have like small little block neighborhood stuff. But I live in a pretty cool part of town in Charlotte called
Mhm.
Plaza Midwood, and so walking distance to my house is about 40 bars and restaurants, and
Wow.
it's been a real challenge, for the restaurant industry here, which is such a key part of the fabric, not only the social fabric, the business fabric, but really it's the livelihood for a lot of people here. Not too much
Yeah.
different, I'm sure, in places like Toronto, New York, and Chicago. So it's been really challenging. So we've tried our best to order the pickup, and
Yeah.
keep our restaurants going, our breweries going. There's a lot of
Yeah.
drive-through activities going on here in Charlotte, just like everywhere else around the country.
Yeah, I mean that's really interesting thing, right? Like people who like I have my favorite bars and favorite place to eat all the time, but it's almost like a mentality shift now. It's like, yeah, why not just order from them takeout to give them support, right? So
Yeah.
food choices is not just about what you eat anymore, but like almost like who do you support and like
Oh,
what kind of
yeah,
identity you have.
very much. And my wife and I have made a very conscious effort to rotate, kind of equally, right? To make
Yeah,
sure that we're hitting up as many local businesses as we can, to keep their support. Because one of our big concerns is that a lot of these restaurants, even though North Carolina is starting to open up a little bit as of really like this last week, it's still not great, I don't think, for a lot of those restaurateurs. So we're trying to do our best.
yeah, absolutely. But let's jump into your company for a bit and what you're trying to build.
Yeah, I kind of lost the audio there a little bit. The audio
Yeah,
jumped
same. Can you hear me now?
a little bit. Yeah, it's a little better. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Cool. Um, awesome. Yeah. So he's kicking it back to your company and what you're trying to build. You're an entrepreneur. How's your business been shifted? What are you trying to get? Like,
Well, quite a bit. As a company, so I acquired the assets of the technology. We're kind of an interesting space as a startup company. The technology that is the core of React has been around for about 20 years, and was owned by a urogynecologist out of Germany. And we ended up acquiring the assets of the technology in 2017. And before that, though, I was exposed to it in 2013. And so we had really, the business, though, really didn't get formed as React as our brand really until the fall of 2018. So we were pretty much new out of the gate, even though there's a lot of clinical history behind the technology. Most people had no idea about our brand and what we did as a business. And so, really it's a startup, but it's unique because it's a startup with an issued 510K from the FDA and 67 cited clinical studies referencing our technology, which is really rare for a med tech startup, if you will. Normally startups don't have that kind of clinical backing.
yeah, absolutely. So let's digest a little bit. So you acquired the technology for this? You acquired this company?
I did. The core technology, yeah, we acquired, and we began building it. It was primarily used as a technology for urinary incontinence to treat pelvic floor disorders. So at our core, what React is, it's the world's most advanced neuromuscular re-education tool. And so we use a high-powered bioelectric magnet that goes through a table or through a chair and stimulates muscle tissue up to 4 inches in depth with no skin contact. So by comparison, you've probably seen like e-stim pads, right, that go on, athletes' arms in rehab settings.
Yeah.
Those
Yeah.
pads are diodes, and they're connected, by wires. And what they do is they send an electric current that goes from A to B,
Mm-hmm.
and that goes about 3 millimeters deep into the muscle tissue. We go over 100 millimeters deep into the muscle tissue. So it's about a 30 times depth that we get, and with no skin contact. So our patients are treated totally with their clothes on. And then the way our devices are designed, we can move the magnet. So a patient can lay down, and I can go from the top of their neck all the way down to their feet in about 2 seconds by just moving a magnet. So it's really effective in terms of efficiency and the outcomes and the overall experience for patients.
Wow. So this is a kind of like a massage therapy tool?
Yeah, it's a neuromuscular re-education tool. So that's kind of a fancy term for, it's really a brain stimulator and a muscle stimulator. So what happens is the magnet sends a pulse into the muscle tissue, and the body has a natural reaction to that muscle tissue. So what happens is our specialized magnet pulse depolarizes the potassium and sodium ions in the muscle cell wall. So when that magnet pulse hits the muscle tissue, and we're talking about billions of cells, right, in like your arm.
Yeah.
And so as it goes through your arm, like this way, it's hitting billions of these cells, and the cells go ping, and the motor cortex of your brain goes and sends a signal back down to your arm, and your arm contracts. And so we can control the rate and the depth of that contraction by the settings that we have on the machine. So in reality, I can totally rehabilitate a paralyzed patient, an injured patient.
Mm-hmm.
We trick their brain and their muscle to re-engage. And so you don't even have to be a participatory patient. You could be unconscious, laying on a table, and I could completely stimulate your shoulder or your arm or your knee or your leg or your calf. It's really a fascinating technology. We've got a great 3D video on our website, reactinnovations.com, which kind of takes you through inside the body and kind of shows the mechanism and how it's working between the brain and the muscle.
That's really fascinating, because it's an external source that's stimulating the muscle directly, and then triggering a response from the brain, right? So it's the backwards training of the brain.
Yeah, and it's really important in overall recovery, because so much when people are injured, especially people who have chronic injuries, the body has an amazing ability to kind of adjust itself short term, right? To if you got pain in your back or something going on in your hip, but long term that causes some real serious issues. And so getting the wiring, if you will, the connectivity between the brain and the muscle back in sync, the way it's naturally designed, is really, really critical. That's one of the reasons in our incontinence brand, which is called Pelvic Wave. So we have two brands. We have React, which is our athletic table and physical therapy table, and then we have Pelvic Wave, which is our chair. And we cure urinary incontinence in about 80% of the patients that we treat, straight up. And so after about 24 treatments over 8 weeks, we have over 80% success rate in curing those patients, which is a big deal. There's about 50 million people in the United States that have that condition today.
So let's talk about that. Is this meant for athletes? Is it meant for people who are injured? Who's your target consumer?
Yeah, it's a mix. So on our React side of our business, we have partnerships and customers in the NFL, the NHL, the Big Ten, the SEC, and the ACC conferences. So we do a lot of work with athletes. We also do a lot of work in physical therapy. So the athletic market for us it's great. I'm a big sports guy. It's awesome interacting with the teams and with the players. The sports market represents a relatively small part of the overall market. Our biggest market is in physical therapy. It's primarily where we operate, and that's really been the growth of our business. And so the therapists use our technology like a tool. A physical therapist would use our technology like a tool, and they would incorporate React as part of their overall therapy program for a patient in a given day or session.
So are these accredited professionals in some sort of capacity? Like, who are these therapists? Right.
Yeah, they're all professional folks. So there's no home version yet where you can go to Best Buy and buy a React table and bring it into your house. Although I'm sure a lot of our patients would love to do that. No, it's all professionals that run the equipment. And so the credentialing ranges from athletic training certificates to physical therapy degrees. We also have chiropractors as well, orthopedic surgeons, physician's assistants. So all people who have medical credentials who operate our equipment primarily.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, I'm kind of familiar with this kind of stuff. I mean, went for massage therapy a few times, and got electrically stimulated by those pads, right? That kind of like convulses part of your muscles.
Mm-hmm.
But you're saying this is like a deeper version of that, the more deeper tissue.
It's a deeper version, and the neuroconnectivity piece is really critical. So what drives that e-stim stimulation that you had on your arm or your leg or your back is an electric current, right? That drives that. What drives ours is a different mechanism entirely. And so it's truly a brain stimulator that's forcing the muscle to contract the way that we want it. So for us, because we don't have any skin contact whatsoever, so we treat athletes literally with their pads and their uniform on. And we go right through it, and can treat them like in a game time scenario without even undressing, which is pretty unheard of in that field, in that sector. But the depth also matters significantly, especially dealing with certain types of injuries. So like core injuries in what's called the psoas muscle or the groin area, deep abdominal muscle issues in the shoulder, issues in the knee and the quad and the hamstring. Those are muscles that if you look at the layer, I mean, if you can e-stim somebody on the edge of their hamstring, and that's great. But if their injury is 2.5 inches deep into the muscle, right, that's really where the tear is, or where the strain is. That e-stim pad's not going to be as effective.
Yeah. Okay. So can you go back to the core technology? Like, how is it stimulating? I guess the neurochemistry of the brain, like through these nerves. Is it stimulate the nerve specifically in the muscles, or the muscle directly? Like which part? How does it affect the
Sure. So our bodies are made up of, muscles are just a collaboration of certain types of cells, right? That create the muscle, and they're triggered through our DNA to be built a certain way. And then ultimately the RNA is the mechanism that reads the DNA signaling back to the brain and allows the brain to interpret those things and allow us to stand and run and jump and do all the stuff that we do. And so the mechanism for us is this depolarization, as I was talking about earlier. So, the radius of our magnet is it goes like a sine wave. So it's a large area. So the total surface area that we cover in treating a patient is about 2.5 inches in diameter. It's about 8 inches in length, and it can go 4 inches deep. So think of it like this, like almost like a brick, right? That's going back and forth. So even if you're treating somebody's, back of their shoulder here, the reality is I'm treating a space that's like this big, okay? And so all of those nerves, all those cells in that muscle are all being depolarized with each varying pulse that we assign to the machine. So we can go 2 hertz as an example, as a setting. So hertz dictates the length of the wave and the speed at which that pulse is ultimately delivered to the muscle. And so we can go from 1 hertz to 50 hertz. So 50 hertz is a very shallow field, about 3/4 of an inch, and rapid. So anywhere at 30 hertz mechanism, or 30 hertz setting, the muscle goes into a full contraction. So we literally, it's like what professionals would call like a Russian stim. So the muscle goes into a full contraction. You can't control it. Like if you're on my table and I have your shoulder in a full contraction, you're not coming off the table. It's almost like pulling you down. It's really powerful stuff. And so that depolarization sends the signaling to the brain, and the brain's firing back to contract the muscle. The reason the muscle contracts at 30 hertz is because the muscle fibers can't respond fast enough to the signaling that's going to the brain. So the pulses are coming in so fast that the brain is basically in constant communication with the muscle, and the muscle just tightens up and contracts. But then we set the setting, so we'll do that for like 5 seconds on, 2 seconds off, 5 seconds on, 2 seconds off, and we'll actually mimic reps for the body. So we tighten and then we release. We tighten, release. It's no different than if you were working out. So we're able to actually build strength in patients. We're able to prevent disuse atrophy, which is a huge issue for injuries. Most people's recovery when they like tear a knee, the ACL will heal. typically in about 8 to 12 weeks. But the year-long recovery, if it even happens at all in full, is because you lost 80% of your quadricep. You know, the muscle in your leg deteriorated because you weren't using your leg normally. So we've got great protocols that we work with our professionals where we do a pre-treatment react and a post-surgical treatment to lessen that atrophy gap and to allow that recovery to be much, much faster and much more efficient. And the statistics all point to that. Not our studies, but other studies for years and years and years showing the effects of limiting quadricep atrophy against like an ACL surgery as an example, and how to increase prognosis. So that was a pretty long-winded answer to your question, but I hope that helped kind of make sense.
No, that's really cool. So I mean, this give me flashbacks to my neuroscience degree back in my undergrad, and one of these labs we did was running oscillating electricity into like live tissue samples, and you can get muscles to twitch based off the frequency and the amount of the electricity you're putting in. So you put over like a shorter frequency, the muscles twitch in a slow motion. You increase the frequency and it goes a higher twitch, and it's pretty much electrical impulses. But in this case, it's going through a saline solution, right? And like it could be anything from a tissue to like even like we did once what's like a claw of like a crab, right? And because the pulses are going in, the claw is opening and closing, even though it's just a claw, there's no brain function, right? And it's interesting because you're able to do that kind of manipulation, but from an external source without non-invasive therapy, right? Through non-invasive methods, you can now trigger these kind of components. So what I'm interested in is like, you can do strength and conditioning training through this, right? When did the technology go from therapeutic from like, helping with injuries to like helping condition people better? Like, can it be an external workout device?
Yeah, it's a pretty heavy piece of machinery. So right now we can't attach it to somebody like running in a field. But that's a really intriguing concept. So you're asking like when that pivot happened, when it went from recovery to performance?
I mean, I feel like the industry might shift there, right? If this technology can condition people now, and you're taking this technology that used to be a very like baseline. Hello, you still there?
I'm still here. Yep.
Yeah. So it's usually a very baseline kind of very shallow kind of presence of the body. Now like a higher depth one, and you have it now. It's handheld. I mean, over time, Moore's law dictates that technology gets smaller and more powerful, right? So like in 2 years, and 4 years, and 8 years, like what do you envision with this? Like, could it be ever used as like a device somehow to become more powerful, to make people more stronger, strength and condition them? Almost like you would go to a gym and work out. Could this ever be a proactive treatment for the body?
The answer is yes. So one of the things that in your experiment in college, did you ever hook up those electrodes to you, or is it just to crabs and frogs?
Yeah. We've done it to ourselves too. So like it makes your muscles twitch.
So did you notice when you turned it up, when you turned up the electricity, you started to get pain, right?
Yeah.
And so part of the challenge with the older technology of eStim today is that those pads, so if you dissect those pads, the actual touch points on the pads are really small, right? And to create a contraction on your arm, which is really strong contraction, those pads are grabbing a very small number of fibers, okay, to start that contraction. So the equivalency would be, if you think about pain signaling to our body, if I grab my arm with my hand and squeeze with this much pressure, doesn't hurt. If I use the same amount of pressure and I put the fingertips in here and pinch my skin, right, that hurts, right? It hurts really bad.
Yeah.
The eStim versus ours works in a similar way. So the eStim is grabbing these small amount of fibers and trying to create a very large load-bearing contraction on a large muscle group. The way we get away with it, and that doesn't cause pain on the patient, but still is effective in terms of getting the level of contraction that we want, is by hitting up billions more of those fibers based on the radius of the magnet and the length of the magnet and the depth that we go. So there's a real experience that is different for the patients and the professionals that we work with. And that's been one of the coolest things in this journey that I've had with this. I was introduced to technology back in 2013. So I've been, it's been in my life for quite some time. And the reason I call the company React Innovations is the reaction that I would get from top professionals in the industry the first time they ever got on this machine. They couldn't believe it. And I'm a former college athlete too. And like, when I got introduced to it, I had the same response. I was like, this is crazy. Like, nothing's touching me. And my body is like completely contracting. Like, how is this doing this? What's the mechanism behind this?
Yeah.
And the science goes back a long time. I mean, it's part of Faraday's laws of magnetism that go back to the 1800s. So the concept of pushing an electromagnetic current onto a muscle tissue and getting it to react or respond is not new. That's not new at all. That's been around for quite some time. But I think the way that we've designed our device and the way our product is really thought through with the user in mind has allowed us to become, successful in the last couple of years. But the future, yeah, you're right. It does get smaller. I think the future also automates the process too. That's a very strong possibility, and part of our intellectual property that we filed is where the device might just scan you and move as needed. One of our visions is like, people that get injured and are in hospitals. Spinal cord injuries is another area of research we're so fascinated with, and we've had some really good anecdotal research that we've done with patients with severe spinal cord injuries and paralysis. And we've been able to, over time, effectively reroute nerves that were otherwise thought to be damaged beyond repair and create contraction and create pain and feeling sensation in muscle groups that otherwise have been completely paralyzed. So the thought is, and this is early, and we don't know the answer to this, but the thought is, if we were to get on patients earlier, could we make a difference immediately following a traumatic injury to prevent that paralysis from even happening? And it's a fascinating area of science, and one of the reasons why we're raising capital this year into React is to start investing in some additional peer-reviewed studies to find out the answers to those questions.
No, I mean, it's fantastic. Like, I can imagine the kind of effect it could have definitely with people with injuries, especially since it's such a non-invasive, effective therapy, would be phenomenal, right? I mean, you see people with injuries, they live with this kind of pain. Like Kevin Hart was recently on Joe Rogan's podcast talking about his car accident, the recovery it took for him to get back to normal baseline. The things that he took for granted, you take for granted as a person, having mobility and agency, is suddenly taken away from you, like the mental deterioration that hits from you. So the faster you can get back to normal, the faster you get to baseline activity, vastly determines also your mental capabilities, right? And effects of your psychology.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we've had nothing short of what and not just me, but other medical professionals who are engaged with us performed what the patients feels like a miracle for them. I mean, our mission as a business is first and foremost to help people. My introduction to this technology really stemmed off of a friend of mine. My commitment, financial commitment, and time to start this company was really built off of an experience with a friend of mine, Matt and Irene, and they have 3 boys and they have twins, identical twin boys. And the identical twin boys, when they were 2.5, one of the boys was experiencing vomiting, and they thought maybe he had some kind of milk allergy or something. So they went through all these tests, nothing came back. So they finally did a scan of his brain and found out he had this really aggressive brain cancer on his brainstem. So they went from 1 hour waking up thinking he's got a milk allergy to they're cutting open my son's head and pulling out parts of his brain in like a matter of like 3 or 4 hours. So he came out of it with basically what you would describe as symptoms of cerebral palsy. And I went to his birthday party about a year after, and he was still really struggling. And what was even more stark was he has an identical twin brother with no cancer, right? So every day the parents wake up and they see the differences between the two, right? And so I said to the dad, I said, Matt, I said, I'm working on this new technology. I don't know if it's going to help your son or not, but I said, I can talk to some of my guys, see if we can do some pro bono work. And we did. And selfishly, I said, don't tell your therapist what we're doing. It's safe to use it on him, but I want to see him worked up. And then I want him to go back to his regular PT and see if they see a difference. And sure enough, it was very clear within a matter of 2 treatments, 4 treatments, 6 treatments, 8 treatments. This little boy went from being completely helpless and couldn't get out of a chair to get to his own walker to walking with his brothers with his walker down to the playground, hundreds of yards away from the family's house. So I witnessed that firsthand and was so emotionally struck by that. I said to my wife, I said, if I don't do something with this technology and really try to make this successful, I'll never forgive myself, because this could be us, this could be our kids someday. And that's really been, that was the core inspiration behind this. It's rooted much more for me than it is, money or success or recognition. It's really about helping people. And we get this every day. I mean, my inbox is full every day from people that get fixed and out of pain and off opioids and can move their shoulder or they're not, they're not incontinent anymore. I mean, their lives are back to normal. It's really a special thing. And I wish everybody had that opportunity in their professional lives to experience that.
I mean, that's an amazing, such a value-driven, a purpose-driven company that you've built here. But can we go back to how you got into this technology? What are the decision-making that went into acquiring this tech? Was this before the situation or after?
So originally, I was a co-founder of another company that its job was to do licensing for new medical innovations. And so we had formed a joint venture with the largest healthcare provider here in the Carolinas it's called Atrium Health now, but it was called Carolinas Healthcare System at the time. And they're a $10 billion organization with 65 hospitals and 60,000 employees. Okay, I mean, big place, right? And we had this startup called Edison Nation, and we created Edison Nation Medical, and we were sourcing medical ideas from around the world. And my job was running biz development for that part of the business. And I looked at 5,000 medical innovations in 2 years that came across my desk. So I saw a lot of stuff. And this was one of them. And so I originally represented the technology to a lot of large, very well-established brands in the worlds of e-stim and surgical rehabilitation, electric stim, and so forth. And I was trying to license it. And all the C-suite guys that I talked to and gals said, we love the technology, but we're a big kahuna now. We don't really license anything. We buy companies. And so if you can build it and be successful with it, maybe we'll come and buy it. So that was part of the business side of it as to kind of what inspired it. But, that was kind of the financial kind of backing. The customer backing started with, very grateful to Ryan Vermillion, who's the head trainer for the Carolina Panthers. He's now with the Washington Redskins, but he was a longtime Panthers trainer. And Ryan took the time with me early on, because I was enamored with it. I thought, this is incredible. I mean, all these people that we get in front of this thing's awesome. But if I'm going to sell to sports or in these other places, I want to talk to the guys who are the best in the industry, right? I want to be the gold standard, the best technology in this industry. And Ryan came over to our office and got on the table and was like, dude, this is legit. But you need some work here to fix this product, because we had an early stage prototype, this early stage. So he was kind enough to let me go into his locker room, and for 2 days our team sat there and worked with his trainers and the athletes, and we figured out, how do you manipulate a 350-pound lineman's psoas muscle? My tradition, and how can this tool be better for that? And so that started our progress with the table. The chair as a business was really already in motion. The doctor who we acquired the technology from was a urogynecologist out of Germany. And so the pelvic floor business was pretty well established in terms of its research and product line. We upgraded it. We created a better business model, I think, that fit better for our customers. And so combined, that's how a single startup ended up really creating two products and two brands in Pelvic Wave and React. And even though the technology is similar, there are differences in them. And there's different 510Ks that come from the FDA that allow us to make marketing claims around the outcomes of those products.
Wow. I mean, that's a really thoroughly built up kind of system you got there. Like you went to work with the very best. You validated and worked out the technology. It's a very systematic way of building a business. Like, how did you develop this kind of framework?
So, I mean, I'll give you the honest to God truth. So I'm a pretty transparent guy, but so we had gotten, and the company will go unnamed, but we had gotten pretty far down the road to licensing the technology for the table back in 2014, 2015 actually. And the company was owned by a large private equity group. And I went out to this company headquarters. I brought a table. I had a dozen of their top engineers looking at our stuff, and they were blown away. And they make eStim products, okay? And they all straight up looked at each other and said, this completely disrupts our business, this technology. Nobody would ever put another pad on their body again after experiencing this technology. So I felt really good about that. I knew that personally, by the way, but it's good to hear that from, someone you're trying to do business with, right? So I left the technology out at their headquarters, and we started the negotiation process. And I got a call one day from the senior VP. I said, hey, how's it going? And he's like, well, me and 13 of my other VPs have been unceremoniously fired. They're going in a new direction with the company. And I'm pretty sure you should still try to do a licensing deal with them, but I'm not sure how successful that's going to be since everybody who is involved with this process has now been let go. So I was pretty bummed out about that. But what was really great about this individual is that I went to him and said, gosh, is there anything I can do? He's like, no, I'm good. He had like 5 job offers like the next day. This guy's like a rock star. Yeah. But he said to me, I said, would you mind sharing with me the roadmap? Like when you were going to acquire this, what were you going to do? He's like, absolutely no problem. He's like, give me 3 days. So sure enough, that Friday or the next Wednesday, I got an email from him with basically like a 10-page business plan. And he said, here's what we were going to do. So I looked at that and said, why would I not try to, mimic that and go about that process? And so, so that's what we did. And here we are. And so it wasn't just about the pilots we did in athletics, because our product is used in 2 ways in healthcare. It's used in cash pay and it's used in insurance. And those are 2 very different worlds in medical. But they both have advantages in different sectors depending on the type of clinic that you run. And so we really had to prove out each product in both environments, both cash pay and insurance. And that's really what we've done since the fall of 2018 up until COVID hit. So we were really jamming and creating these kind of beachheads of pilots. And our biggest customer in Team Rehab has been phenomenal to work with. There are 100 clinics in 5 states, and we basically did an 18-month pilot with them. And we got a lot of data from patient use and all that stuff. And we check all 3 boxes for them. So it's 3 boxes of their metrics, which is improving patient satisfaction, which is their #1 indicator for referrals in their business. 2, measurable quantitative outcomes that you can measure through science and data and x-rays and MRIs. And 3 was revenue generation. And we hit all 3, and not just hit them all, but like we're hitting doubles, triples, and home runs off that. So they came to us and gave us a pretty substantial purchase order in February of this year, and we're working on executing that now.
Awesome. So let's go back to exactly like your product. Is it a product, a service, or a blended system? Like what is the package you sell? And
so I like to refer to React and Pelvic Wave as verbs. The experience that people have on our equipment is like nothing else. And every day I rack my brain to try to think about how I can replicate the experience of getting on our equipment through a video or through text. It's hard to do, right? But we are a company that sells equipment at our core. We don't run clinics yet, and that's really not in our short-term plans. Maybe in the long run we might do something like that. But for now, the model works really well in just partnering with existing customers that have established patient populations, that have professional staff, physical locations that patients come to get therapy. So our device is used as a service, right? So they buy the equipment from us, and then they use that tool to treat a patient, and then they either bill insurance for that or they charge the patient cash, depending on their business model.
Gotcha. So if a massage therapist wants one of these, they can just contact you and put in a purchase order and buy a table or a few.
Yeah. And it's interesting you mentioned massage, because I have a friend who's a longtime massage therapist, and he and I spoke a lot about the use of our technology in the hands of a massage therapist, and creating even like a business that would compete with like a massage therapy or somebody like that, where you have all no-touch therapy. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so kind of bullish on the future for us. I mean, there isn't a device in the world that's better at what it does non-touch than React. Not a single one.
Yeah.
And so I don't think even though COVID seems to be slowing down, hopefully it goes away and we get a vaccine and it becomes a footnote in history. But in the short term, I think this virus has really changed everything about the way we think about social interaction and office work, and certainly in healthcare and in physical therapy, which is such a hands-on skill set. I mean, the therapists pride themselves, and rightfully so, as to what they can do with their hands on people. And so, and it's like being a dentist. Like, how do you social distance as a dentist? I mean, you're kicking in people's mouths, right? Like, this is just the nature of their work. So I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic, and we're seeing that now, that React is becoming a really key piece to kind of distancing themselves and being able to provide a barrier for patients by just having them be on the table, and then the therapist can just move the wand back and forth at a reasonable difference. Not 6 feet, but certainly about 2 to 3, which is better than 0.
Yeah, I mean, what's the price point of one of these devices? If someone wants to, can they buy it through your website? Do you have to contact you first?
Yeah, they contact us. So we retail our tables for $49,000, and we retail the chairs for $45,000. And then we have a service, warranty, assistance, and training package we call a SWAT package, which is a couple $1,000s a year that goes into servicing with the clients. But everybody that buys our equipment, we don't just like deliver and drop it off. There's a lot of engagement with our team with their staff. And so for the table, we go in, it's white glove delivery, and we spend 2 days in the clinic with the therapist. So there's a lot of materials that we provided them to read and become educated in the forefront. And then we spend a full 2 days at each of those clinics engaged and I guess intertwined, if you will, with the actual staff. And then once we leave, we help them build protocols for each of those patients that we come in, and so then they know how to measure and manage the equipment accordingly, and then ultimately see the outcomes. And then we're there for several years after if they need us or they have questions. We're there to answer and support them in any way they need.
Wow. So, like, what I like about this model is that in manufacturing level companies they generally struggle a lot and don't get a lot of support, because because you gotta have inventory, you gotta have economies of scale, you gotta get you're dependent on supply chains. A lot of investors struggle to look into the space as a viable opportunity. But you've kind of proven this kind of market where it's generally like already established players, but you disrupted it through the technology, right? But are you limited at all by the area you can physically service? Is it like you need physical drop off of people, or
or engagement?
So you're asking, are we limited in terms of our capacity as a company to make these, or deliver them, or service them, or all the above?
Yeah, like what are your limits right now to growth, like as you develop?
Yeah, it's a good question, fair question. So, I'm a big believer in the lean startup.
Yeah.
I actually teach a course using Eric Ries's book, great book, at Central Piedmont Community College. So I teach a class on startups in all my spare time. But I love doing it because I love to teach and I love giving back to folks, and it's great to see aspiring entrepreneurs trying to want to take an idea and bring it up. So I've really applied a lot of those principles to React for the last 2-3 years. So we run a pretty lean operation in terms of our burn. That's going to change this year because we've kind of maximized the amount of time our team can really manage this and grow it the way that we want to grow it and the way that we will grow it. So, we've got great supply chain in the business, which is really important. I think, as a company, especially a med tech company, like, to do all this yourself is really almost impossible and cost prohibitive in most cases. Even the big guys like Medtronic don't really manufacture anything anymore. They have subcontractors that make that stuff, and then they're a sales and distribution organization primarily, right? So we've got great suppliers in our chain, and we try to leverage those folks as much as we can. There are a few things that we have brought in house and will continue to bring in house, as we grow and get older. But we've run this as a pretty tight ship. So our capacity right now as a company, we can knock out about 10 units a month right now in our current capacity, but I've got the ability to turn that up relatively quickly. And that's part of what we're doing. Our stuff, it's not cheap, right? I mean, it's the price of a nice car. I mean, 49 grand, for a piece of equipment is not a casual investment that any company makes. But, our costs of goods are really expensive too. I mean, making medical devices is an expensive process with a lot of paperwork, a lot of documentation, a lot of historical management of that portfolio. So just because I sell a unit in 2018 doesn't mean that I'm no longer responsible for that equipment. Down the road, I have to maintain insurance and other things that support a business model like this. So we feel pretty good about our future. COVID has certainly put a damper in terms of the volume of sales that we're going to make this year, especially in sports, which is, no one really knows exactly when sports are going to come back, if they're going to come back at all. This year, I think everybody's optimistic, but we don't really know how that's going to work out long term. So, sports is kind of taking a dip, but because we're actually a device that's being used for COVID recovery in Michigan right now, I think our prospects are looking really good for this year. So,
yeah, I mean, med tech is right now going through a revolution, right? Because entire medical community is being revolutionized, literally revolutionized through this lockdown and pandemic. People are much more open to like new solutions and looking into modernizing their existing infrastructure and systems.
That's true, and I think I'm 42 years of age. Okay, so I'm of a generation where I remember having my parents' insurance and getting injured and paying zero deductible on anything. Right? How much does insurance cost? Healthcare cost? Nobody really knows. I have insurance through my work, and it just somebody pays for it. Right? So that's kind of how it works.
Yeah.
And then you've seen this, kind of massive shift in creating, even people with great jobs and great insurance still have out-of-pocket expenses of, they have health savings accounts now. They've got, basically kind of almost catastrophic deductibles of $5,000, $7,000, $10,000 out of pocket before their insurance actually kicks in. And so people are a lot more conscious now about what things cost. And I think overall, building wellness into this. Healthcare, a lot of folks call healthcare today really sick care, right? So we wait until somebody's really injured or has a major problem before we start applying good principles and technology to keep them, to get them back to where they were. But it's way easier to keep somebody healthy than to try to fix somebody who's sick. Mark Wahlberg said it best. Somebody interviewed him sometimes, said, how do you get in such great shape? He's in his 50s, right? He's like, the key to being in great shape is never getting out of shape. So, pretty good advice, right? And so I think what we're finding, and especially in our athletic realm with React, is that people are, the athletic trainers are using our product as a tool for injury prevention. And so we're able to work the wide receiver's hamstrings or the glutes of the lineman before he even goes out to practice, so that we lessen the probability of a strain or an injury that occurs on the field. And so that's a big part of what we're doing through athletic training. And to be honest with you, Robbie, one of my missions as a company with Pelvic Wave, I feel like we could eradicate stress level incontinence, so leaky bladders in women under 50 in this country. I believe that, because so much of incontinence is an issue related to childbirth and aging that goes relatively ignored, and where the solution is surgery only when things get really, really bad. And we have the ability to re-engage the pelvic floor and retrain the brain and those muscles to work actively that eliminates that condition. So if we would be proactive in treating women and men who are starting to experience age-related incontinence or postpartum-related incontinence and treat them early, we prevent that back-end drop that occurs when people start reaching in their mid-60s and all of a sudden they can't control their bodily function and they're going in for a $35,000, $40,000 surgery that has a 20% failure rate. So I think the mission of healthcare and people like us who are really actively thinking about and trying to provide solutions that keep people healthy and prevent them from getting injured is a good business model to bet on in the future.
Cool. Awesome. I mean, I absolutely agree. I think it's like a pretty cool model you guys are working on right now. But I do have a thought that I want to get your opinion on. And I was having it while talking about the miniaturization of this technology and where it could go in the future, right? I mean, do you know what haptic suits are? Haptic feedback suits?
No.
So when it comes to like VR or AR technology, right? Haptic feedback suits are like literally suits you wear that gives you tactile sensory information, like when we're playing a game or like when
Yes.
you're in VR mode.
Yes.
Suits.
I have seen those. I didn't know it as referred to that name, but yeah, I've definitely seen some biofeedback shirts and other things you wear for heart rate and temperature and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, cool stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So like there are these materials now coming up. What they're trying to build it to be like constrict, almost like a second skin that gives you like a feeling of like of sensory impact. So what I'm kind of envisioning is like this kind of technology can be used for haptic feedback.
So it's interesting. I would certainly in combination would be a really interesting mashup, right, of technologies. One of the things that we find so interesting about React, it's not built this way, but it acts this way, almost like a diagnostic tool. So you may feel fine, and we'll roll the magnet over a certain area in your body that you didn't think was out of whack. And all of a sudden you can feel the tightness jump up in your lower lumbar or in your back, oblique. And again, one of the first things I said earlier, like the body has an amazing ability to adjust when it's injured and still operate and function until it doesn't. And as people get older, people that cross the chasm when you're 20s to 30, 30 to 40, 40 to 50, and all of a sudden you're doing something like lifting the garbage out of the can, and all of a sudden your back gets wrenched and you're like lying on the ground, right? Well, what caused that was a slow, typically an imbalance of your hips and psoas that puts a load on your L4, L5 in your spine, and then all of a sudden you're lifting a 20-pound bag of garbage out of the bag, and boop, your disc pops, right? And then you're out of commission for like months. And so I love the idea of mashing up with diagnostic tools that allow us to see how the body is responding in a certain way when connected to our devices. Now, we're not mobile yet. We are working on a mobile device. But it's a cart system. So it's not mobile in the sense like, my phone mobile.
Yeah.
It still weighs hundreds of pounds, but at least it puts it on a cart system that allows it to be more portable in hospital environments and as well as for athletic training and military. So those are some of our advisors and customers that, you know, military wants to throw it out of a C-130, you know, at a base, right? Because these soldiers are always getting beat up. These guys and girls are carrying 100 pounds of gear in the middle of a desert, you know, and they got serious, and they're turning towards athletic training techniques and tools to help heal them quicker.
Yeah.
And ultimately that's what we do.
At all about this?
What's that?
Have you talked to the military about this at all?
Yeah. We've got in North Carolina, we're pretty fortunate here. We have a very large military presence, specifically out in the Fayetteville area. So we have Fort Bragg and Camp Lejeune here in North Carolina, so we've got some good industry partners that have helped us get connected. We've not yet sold anything into the military. There's a lot of interest, but because it is tough for small businesses like us to get contracts into the military, so you almost have to really kind of work through a third party or a distributor. But we're working on that. We've been to their conferences several times. We get invited all the time. They've been really great to us, and eventually we'll get there. But I kind of know what they need, and you know, they really need a mobile system that they can wheel around.
I can imagine.
Yeah. So I mean, our table's on wheels, and you can move it, but you know, it's a table. It's designed to hold a 350-pound offensive lineman. So you know, that thing in itself has to be pretty sturdy, right? And usually when it gets put into a clinic, it's put into a room or a corner, and that's where it lives forever. But you know, we do realize the need to be more flexible, and that feedback's come from the military as well as some of our professional contacts, you know, in baseball and hockey and in basketball, who, you know, travel a lot more than the NFL teams do. So they need a more portable system to go with them from town to town.
Interesting. Yeah. Cool. Well, Ken, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for coming on and talking about your company in such detail. It's really exciting technology, and it's really cool that you explain the science and the fundamentals behind it that drives it forward. I'm sure our listeners really appreciated that. We're going to cut the episode here, but stick around for a few minutes. We'll do a quick debrief.
Okay.
For everyone listening in, thanks for listening, and this is Ken.
Thank you, Robbie. Thank you for the opportunity.